in every single phase of Harbor, that's been the pattern. That God has stirred hearts and God has moved people. And then once we stood up and we said, okay, we're ready. You're doing something and we're here to do whatever it is you want. Then he said, all right, now I'll tell you what it is.
We just stepped out by faith. And that's kind of the story of Harbor, is that we just had to step out by faith and then trust that God knew what he was doing when we didn't know what we were doing.
I mean, ultimately, Harbor is something that is a dream that God's been forming over the course of the past 5 years. And so we gathered with the group of people that had committed to help us start Harbor, and we all just brainstormed and said, you know, what kind of church does Cape Cod need? What kind of church
would impact our neighbors? Yeah,
your friends and family that you want to know Jesus. What kind of church would help them grow?
It all started right here, right in our living room. I mean, it's hard to believe. A little over 5.5 years ago, we were just trying to gather some people together.
Yeah, I mean, it was, 12 people, a dog, a few folding chairs, and we'd come here in the mornings and we'd have some coffee and some donuts and we'd have a little time of worship. So we really loved this idea of a church that, yes, was about people gathering and people coming in and finding safety and getting built up, but also ultimately it's a place that's on mission. It's a place that comes together to accomplish something great.
Let's be honest, 12 people in a house was about the max that Harbor could grow to, trying to grow that. So we knew we needed another space. So we moved, I think around February, into a clubhouse a couple miles from here. And that during that time, I think we grew up to maybe about 20 people at that clubhouse, and it had some big milestones for us.
Yeah, that's where we spent our first Easter. It's where we had our first communion as a church. It's where we had our first baptism. And those memories. To this day, those are some of my favorite memories. It's also during that time that we got connected with Victory Baptist Church down in Tennessee. It was kind of this really crazy moment, because at the time, I mean, this group of 20 people is thinking like, all right, I'm kind of a part of this church, and we meet in a clubhouse and there's, 15 or 20 of us. And then all of a sudden, Josh and I come back from Tennessee and we're like, so a church gave us $188,000.
Try to buy a building. Yeah.
So that was really wild.
That's when we went and got a storefront, and we moved into Hyannis, officially into Hyannis, when we moved across from the Cape Cod beer brewery there. And it was in that storefront that we were able to find and close the deal on the pet store that is currently Harbor.Church's home. We got the loan, we got the building while we were in the storefront, and that was a fun, scary time for our church. But
it was a cool time. I mean, there was a couple of young families joined, and it felt like overnight Harbor kids, went from just Annabelle,
our kid, just our one kid,
to now there's like a little group of kids, and it kind of just felt like we were like a real church.
And when we closed on the building, we thought we were going to go from the storefront into our pet store building as a church, and that didn't happen.
It didn't work that way. We found out that some of the permitting, was not where we wanted it to be, and
they wanted us to do a lot of work.
We had gotten out of the lease in the storefront, and Josh stood up and he said, all right, that's the end of the service. I don't know where we're gonna meet next week, but God will provide something. So everybody just, we're gonna email you, we'll post it on Facebook, and we'll tell you by Friday night, where we're gonna meet next week. And sure enough, in that 6-day span, we got our answer of a place that we could go.
And Zion Union Church, what they did is they reached out and said, hey, if you want to use our basement, you're more than welcome to. And we didn't think we would need it.
Yeah.
But then a couple months later, we didn't have our storefront and we weren't allowed to move into our pet store.
Yeah.
So we took them up on their basement.
So we thought we were going to spend about 6 weeks in that basement. But God knew that the story was going to go a little different than that.
We spent almost 2.5 years in the Zion Church's basement.
But in that time, we grew to 200 people.
Yeah, Reverend Harris was so kind to us, and the way that church partnered with us. I still remember the Sunday where we all got together before we left, and man, that was a beautiful time. Just seeing that Harbor isn't the only thing that God is doing on the Cape for the gospel. Harbor just gets to be a part of the story of Jesus impacting Cape Cod and New England, and so that was cool to partner with them. The 2-year building project that seemed to go on forever, that was God preparing us, because we thought we would move in with 40 people, and we moved into the building with almost 200 people.
Yeah.
We needed to be at 200 when we opened the building in April of 2019, because I remember that Palm Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
We opened the building and it was like everybody came. And from April of 2019 up until COVID, it's like every week there was 10 new families coming to Harbor. I mean, in 1 year, we grew from 200 to over 400 people. We doubled, and God knew that we needed those kind of people to be a part of that beginning of that journey. So he prepared us in the basement for what the pet store was going to bring.
Yeah, and it was that first Sunday, I just remember having so many conversations with people and just one right after another, having people say, oh, like, we've been waiting and now we're here. And what we didn't know is that God was stirring in people's hearts, and that, we thought that we were a church of 200, but God, without us doing anything, God was actually growing us to a church of 400. And there was all of these people that he was about to bring in, and we didn't even know their names yet.
While we were growing in the basement, that was also when we added a lot of our community outreach, and we were doing the Faith Family Feeding Kitchen. We were doing the, the highway cleanups and the food drives for the Children's Cove. And so we were becoming an active part of the community without ever having a home, because we've always believed that the building isn't the church.
Right.
The church has always been the people. And that's the cool thing about Harbor. Harbor is this eclectic group of dumpster fires. And we're from all over, a lot of people off Cape, on Cape, transplants, locals, Washer-shores, some tourists, it's just a hodgepodge of people that have come together.
And still a few dogs, actually.
And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And we had to go to online only. But even through COVID, I mean, man, God blessed in a really hard time.
I think that we'd be lying if we said that we weren't a little bit scared. I mean, we'd been in this building for, at that point, less than a year. And it's hard not to look around and go, well, Harbor at that point has added staff. We've added missionaries. We have a building. We have, how is all of this going to work? And it was really incredible to see during that year, we grew. It was just so incredible to see God provide, and to see the people of Harbor really rally and maintain community, even in a time when so many people were becoming isolated and disconnected. I think every week that we get to do this, we realize that God's not done yet, because there's still friends, there's still family, there's still people around us that need to know Jesus.
Harbor is not a story of what Josh and Kaleigh Adams have built. If anything, it's a story of what God has built in spite of Josh and Kaleigh.
Yeah.
We're just blessed to get to be, at the helm of this ship. And there's something amazing to seeing it come to life.
Yeah.
And seeing the people that have accepted Christ and have had life come back to them. It reminds me of us having our first child and seeing something where you're like, wow, how is this even possible? It is a miracle. We know that all of this has been God's blessing. And so the fact that we grew when other people weren't growing, the fact that we've gotten back to our pre-COVID numbers and surpassed them, man, that just speaks to how much God is at work. And when the Holy Spirit moves in a community, our goal is just to say yes and get out of the way. Just do whatever it is that God's calling us to do. And so I think that's kind of been the mantra of Harbor, is just some people that are fortunate enough to be right in the middle of God's will. And hopefully we want to be smart enough to keep saying yes to him, and then let him work in spite of us. If you look at the history of Harbor, nothing has happened the way it was supposed to happen. It's never gone according to the textbooks. And everything that we've read and everything that we've been told, God has kind of just looked at our plans and pushed them off the table and then said, here's what I've got for Harbor. So we are so much further down the road than what we thought. I mean, but that's where the Bible says God can do exceedingly abundantly above and beyond anything you could ever ask or think. And so I think that's going to be true for 5 years from now.